Late August 1944. Falaise Pocket, Normandy, France. The captured M4A3 Sherman tank sat motionless in a German field workshop near Argentan, its distinctive large oval driver's hatches marking it as a recent production model. Oberfeldwebel Kurt Steiner from Panzer Regiment 114 circled the vehicle slowly, his notebook already filling with observations that contradicted everything Wehrmacht doctrine had taught about American tank vulnerability. This particular Sherman, registration number USA 3081942, built by Fisher Tank Arsenal and knocked out during the breakout from Saint-Lô, would not burn. The tank had taken 3 direct hits from Panther 75mm armor-piercing rounds. All 3 had penetrated the hull, the crew had escaped, and the Sherman had not caught fire. For German tankers who had spent months watching enemy tanks explode into pillars of flame after a single penetrating hit, this represented an engineering achievement they could barely comprehend. The Americans had solved the ammunition fire problem that still plagued every German armoured vehicle in service. They had done it quietly, without fanfare, and they had done it so effectively that captured Shermans with this new system refused to burn even under conditions that would have turned a Panther into a crematorium. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The mathematics of tank survivability were about to be rewritten, not through thicker armour or more powerful guns, but through something German engineers had dismissed as impossible to achieve in combat vehicles. Ammunition storage surrounded by liquid-filled jackets that would extinguish propellant fires before they could consume the crew. American automotive engineers had created a system that kept their tank crews alive, while German tank designers watched their supposedly superior vehicles burn with their crews trapped inside. Steiner had commanded a Panther OSF A in the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitler Youth before his tank threw a track outside Cayenne, and he'd been reassigned to technical evaluation duties. He had watched 5 Shermans burn catastrophically during the fighting around Carpiquet airfield in early July. Every one had erupted in flames within seconds of being hit, the turrets launching skyward from the force of ammunition detonations inside the fighting compartment. The intelligence briefing 3 days ago had mentioned rumours of a new American tank variant, something about changed ammunition storage, modified hull design. The briefing officer had been vague, working from fragmentary reports from reconnaissance units who had examined knocked-out American tanks and found unexpected modifications. Nobody had expected the modification to work this well. Spring 1943, Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, United States. American ordnance engineers had identified the problem with brutal mathematical clarity. 60 to 80% of Shermans penetrated by enemy fire burned. Crew casualties in tanks that burned averaged 1.28 dead or wounded per knocked-out tank. Crew casualties in tanks that did not burn averaged 0.78 per loss. The difference between burning and not burning determined whether tank crews lived or died. Solving the fire problem would save more American lives than any improvement to armour thickness or gun penetration. The investigation began with tanks cleared of ammunition. Multiple penetrations produced frequent mechanical damage, but fires remained rare. The same test conducted with tanks containing full ammunition loads, but no fuel or oil told a completely different story. 90% of penetrations of the fighting compartment caused immediate fires when ammunition was present. The propellant in artillery shells, not gasoline in the engine compartment, caused Sherman catastrophic fires. Carbon dioxide fire extinguishers proved useless against propellant fires. Only large quantities of water could suppress them, and water was never available inside a burning tank. The solution required preventing propellant fires from starting, not extinguishing them after ignition. Engineers drafted a new ammunition storage layout that would protect propellant from penetrations and keep ammunition below the track line, where enemy fire was less likely to strike. Initial tests used a rack surrounded by water, but the first penetration tore the entire container apart through hydraulic shock. The pressure wave from a shell striking water-filled containers literally exploded the racks, defeating the protective purpose. The solution came from automotive cooling system design. Concentric cells with water filling the space between them, leaving air at the top to absorb pressure. Each 75mm round would rest in an inner cylinder surrounded by a water jacket, with individual cells preventing hydraulic shock from propagating through the entire rack. Test firing at Sherman hulls fitted with the new wet ammunition storage produced dramatic results. 37mm and 75mm shells punctured 14 ammunition cells. Only 2 caught fire. The wet storage system reduced fire probability by approximately 85% compared to dry ammunition storage. Production implementation began in late 1943. The M4A1 with the 76mm gun received wet storage first in January 1944. The M4A3 with 75mm gun followed in February. By midsummer 1944, wet storage Shermans were reaching frontline units in significant numbers, though dry storage tanks remained common throughout the campaign. The system used water mixed with ethylene glycol to prevent freezing in cold climates. Later, production substituted a proprietary solution called AmmuDamp, containing rust inhibitors that protected the steel containers from corrosion. Each ammunition bin in the hull floor held multiple rounds in their water-jacketed cells, with a total liquid capacity of approximately 131 litres for 76mm gun tanks. The wet storage tanks required modified hull design. Ammunition moved from vulnerable sponson racks above the tracks to protected bins below the turret floor. This eliminated the need for applique armor plates that had been welded to earlier Shermans in attempts to protect sponson ammunition. The hull modifications also necessitated removing most of the turret basket, replacing it with a partial floor suspended from the turret ring. Crews initially resisted the change because wet storage reduced the ready ammunition supply. The original Sherman carried 12 unprotected rounds clipped to the turret basket wall where the loader could grab them instantly. Wet storage. Tanks reduced this to 6 rounds in an armoured ready rack. Loaders complained about reduced immediate ammunition availability, but the trade-off between convenience and survival became obvious once crews understood the fire protection benefits. June 1944. Normandy hedgerow country. American tank battalions equipped with the new wet storage, Shermans entered combat during Operation Overlord without knowing how effective the modification would prove under actual battlefield conditions. The first weeks of fighting would provide the data that proved the system worked exactly as designed. German Panther and Tiger guns could still penetrate Sherman armor at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. The 75mm Cave K-42 gun on the Panther delivered muzzle velocities of 925 meters per second, providing penetration capability that exceeded anything the Allies fielded until the British 17-pounder Firefly variant appeared in limited numbers. But penetration and destruction were not synonymous. A Sherman penetrated by armor-piercing ammunition might suffer crew casualties and mechanical damage without burning. The crew could escape. The tank could potentially be recovered and repaired. A Sherman that burned was a total loss, and the crew frequently died trying to escape the flames. The statistics from Normandy fighting revealed the dramatic improvement wet storage provided. Field studies conducted by US First Army examining knocked-out tanks between June and August 1944 showed dry storage. Shermans burned at rates between 50 and 60% when penetrated. Wet storage Shermans in the same combat conditions burned at rates between 10 and 15%. The modification reduced fire probability by approximately 75% under actual combat conditions. Tank crews in wet storage. Shermans who took penetrating hits had dramatically better survival chances than crews in earlier dry storage variants. The difference between technologies developed just months apart determined which American tank crews lived and which died in French hedgerows. Late August 1944. German Field Workshop, Falaise Pocket. Oberfeldwebel Steiner examined the interior of the captured M4A3 Sherman, with growing unease. The ammunition storage bins on the hull floor were unlike anything he had seen in German tanks. Each bin consisted of a double-walled metal container, with water filling the space between inner and outer walls. The 3 Panther hits had penetrated the hull and punctured several ammunition cells. The water had vented through the penetration holes, creating steam that had flooded the fighting compartment and driven the crew out. But the propellant had not ignited. The American crew had abandoned a tank that was damaged but not destroyed, capable of being towed to a repair facility and returned to service after relatively minor work. Steiner's Panther, by comparison, stored its 79 rounds of 75mm ammunition in vulnerable hull sponsons on both sides of the turret. OSFD and A models carried 36 rounds total in these sponsons, 18 per side. The OSFG variant with deeper sponsons held 48 rounds in the side storage areas. Every German tank manual acknowledged that penetration of the sponson ammunition storage areas usually led to catastrophic fire. The Panther carried additional ammunition in the forward hull compartment directly underneath the mantlet, where American tankers had learned to aim when engaging Panthers frontally. Penetrations in this area frequently detonated stored ammunition, killing the driver and radio operator instantly, and often triggering secondary explosions that consumed the entire vehicle. 3 rounds were stored under the turret turntable in all Panther variants, creating another vulnerable point where penetrations triggered immediate ammunition fires. German tank designers had sacrificed crew survivability for ammunition capacity and ease of loading, prioritizing tactical convenience over strategic sustainability. The American approach inverted these priorities. Wet storage Shermans carried slightly fewer ready rounds, accepted more complex loading procedures, and required crews to trust that the water-jacketed containers would protect them. In exchange, American tank crews survived hits that would have killed their German counterparts, returning to combat in replacement vehicles with the experience and skills that could not be replaced. Steiner documented the wet storage system in detailed sketches and notes. The information would reach Wehrmacht tank development offices within weeks, triggering frantic attempts to retrofit similar systems to German production vehicles. But German industry in late 1944 lacked the capacity for major design modifications. Panther production continued with unchanged ammunition storage through the end of the war, the vulnerability acknowledged but never corrected. September 1944. Eastern Front, near Warsaw. Hauptmann Friedrich Voss commanded the 2nd Company of Panzer Regiment 33, equipped with Panther OSFG tanks that had arrived from the factory in July. His battalion had lost 9 Panthers to ammunition fires in the past 3 weeks of fighting against Soviet armor. Only 2 of those 9 tanks had been hit by enemy fire powerful enough to penetrate the frontal armor. The other 7 had taken side hits from T-34 85mm guns at ranges under 1,000 meters. Every side penetration that struck the sponson ammunition storage areas had resulted in immediate catastrophic fire. Voss had watched crews burning alive inside tanks that should have been survivable losses, trapped by jammed hatches or stunned by the violence of ammunition detonation before they could escape. Soviet tankers had learned to target Panther sides specifically because of the ammunition vulnerability. German tactical doctrine emphasized presenting frontal armor to the enemy, but combat rarely permitted such perfect positioning. The moment a Panther turned to relocate or maneuver, its vulnerable sides became exposed to enemy fire. A single T-34 hit to the sponson area transformed a 45-ton medium tank into a funeral pyre. German tank recovery units reported finding Panthers abandoned by their crews without mechanical failure or combat damage severe enough to justify abandonment. Interviews with the crews revealed they had fled after hearing ammunition cooking off inside the hull, a distinctive popping sound that signaled imminent catastrophic explosion. The psychological impact of knowing their ammunition storage made their tanks' death traps undermined crew confidence and combat effectiveness. Voss had commanded a captured M4A3 Sherman with diesel engines during the summer fighting in Belarus before his unit received the new Panthers. Soviet forces used thousands of these American Lease-Lend tanks, and significant numbers fell into German hands during successful local counterattacks. Wehrmacht mechanized units desperate for operational vehicles pressed captured Shermans into service without extensive modification because they worked reliably as designed. The Sherman he had commanded for 3 weeks before it threw a track during a retreat had carried him through multiple engagements without catching fire, despite taking 2 penetrating hits that wounded his loader and destroyed the transmission. Both hits had struck the lower hull, and both times the tank had filled with steam as water from damaged ammunition storage cells vaporized. The crew had escaped easily through the large hatches while the tank burned from oil leaking onto hot engine components, but the ammunition had never detonated. His Panther, received as a replacement after the Sherman became unrecoverable, had already lost 2 companies of Panthers to ammunition fires. The contrast between American and German approaches to crew survivability could not have been more obvious to anyone who had experienced both systems. October 1944, Aachen, Germany. American forces conducting the first major assault on German territory examined knocked-out Panthers abandoned during the city's defense. Ordnance technical intelligence teams photographed and measured every aspect of the German tanks, documenting vulnerabilities and confirming reports from Normandy about Panther ammunition storage weaknesses. One Panther OSFG sat near the cathedral, its turret blown completely off the hull ring by internal ammunition detonation. The explosion had been powerful enough to throw the 40-ton turret 15 meters from the chassis. American investigators examining the wreckage found residue indicating the sponson ammunition storage had detonated first, triggering a cascade that consumed all 79 rounds within seconds. The catastrophic nature of Panther ammunition fires created problems for German recovery operations that American forces never faced with wet storage Shermans. A Sherman that burned might lose its turret interior and have its engine compartment damaged, but the hull structure frequently remained intact enough for salvage. A Panther that suffered ammunition detonation was unrecoverable, the hull rendered scrap by the violence of explosions that German armor could not contain. American intelligence bulletins distributed to tank battalions emphasized engaging Panthers from the side whenever possible, specifically targeting the areas where German ammunition was stored. The bulletins included diagrams showing vulnerable points and noted that side hits frequently resulted in spectacular fires that eliminated the Panther from combat permanently. American tank destroyer doctrine incorporated these findings, with crews trained to maneuver for flank shots that would penetrate sponson storage areas. The tactical impact of ammunition storage design extended beyond individual tank engagements to shape operational level planning. American armored divisions could sustain continuous offensive operations because knocked-out Shermans frequently provided recoverable hulls that maintenance units could repair and return to service. German panzer divisions conducting defensive operations watched their effective combat strength decline irreversibly as Panthers burned beyond any possibility of recovery. November 1944. Hürtgen Forest. The miserable fighting in dense woodland reduced tank engagements to close-range ambushes, where side armor became critical and ammunition fires determined crew survival. American tank battalions equipped predominantly with M4A3 75mm wet storage. Shermans maintained operational availability rates above 70% throughout the campaign, despite heavy losses to German anti-tank guns and Panzerfaust infantry rockets. German Panther battalions supporting defensive operations in the same terrain averaged below 40% operational availability, with ammunition fires eliminating more Panthers than American guns. The close terrain permitted German infantry armed with Panzerfausts to engage Panther sides at ranges under 50 meters, exactly the scenario that maximized ammunition storage vulnerability. A Panzerfaust hit to a Panther sponson at 30 meters range detonated stored ammunition with the same catastrophic results as a 76mm armor-piercing round from an American tank gun at 1,000 meters. The vulnerability remained constant regardless of the threat, determined entirely by ammunition storage design that German engineers had never prioritized for protection. American infantry armed with bazookas achieved similar results against Panthers by targeting side sponson areas. Tactical bulletins distributed to rifle companies included specific instructions about where Panther ammunition was stored and how to recognize the external signs of internal storage locations. American combined arms doctrine evolved to exploit known German tank vulnerabilities, with infantry support becoming critical for preventing Panther escape after successful side penetrations that triggered ammunition fires. The Hurtgen fighting demonstrated that armor thickness and gun power mattered less than ammunition protection in determining tank effectiveness. Panthers with superior frontal armor and more powerful guns lost to Shermans with inferior specifications but better crew survivability. The Sherman crews who survived knockouts returned to combat in replacement vehicles, their experience making them deadlier opponents. Panther crews who died in ammunition fires took their irreplaceable training with them, degrading German combat effectiveness with every loss. December 1944. Ardennes offensive preparation areas. German panzer divisions assembled for Operation Wacht. Am Rhein included hundreds of Panthers that would participate in Hitler's last major counteroffensive in the West. Every Panther commander knew his tank carried a critical vulnerability in its ammunition storage. Every crew understood they were statistically more likely to die in an ammunition fire than from direct combat wounds. Wehrmacht leadership recognized the problem but lacked solutions. Retrofitting existing Panthers with wet ammunition storage would require hull modifications that German industry could not accomplish, given production priorities and strategic bombing damage to manufacturing facilities. New tank designs incorporating protected ammunition storage remained years away from production, and Germany lacked years. The Panthers would fight with the ammunition storage they had, and crews would die in fires that better engineering could have prevented. The American tank battalions opposing the German offensive carried predominantly M4A3 wet storage variants that had proven their survivability through 6 months of combat. The statistical advantage American crews enjoyed through superior ammunition protection would prove decisive in the coming battles, though neither side fully understood this at the offensive's start. December 16, 1944. Opening day of the Ardennes offensive. German Panther battalions achieved tactical surprise and initial success, overrunning American positions and destroying dozens of Shermans in the opening hours. But the Panthers themselves began suffering ammunition fires at catastrophic rates as American forces recovered from the initial shock and began engaging German armor from defensive positions. The 4th Armored Division defending Bastogne knocked out 17 Panthers during the first week of fighting. American after-action reports documented that 14 of the 17 Panthers burned completely, their crews killed or severely wounded by ammunition fires. The 3 Panthers that did not burn had been hit in locations that avoided ammunition storage areas, and 2 of those 3 were recovered by American forces and pressed into service by desperate tank destroyer battalions. German after-action reports from Panzer Division noted that of 43 Panthers lost between December 16th and December 24th, 31 had burned from ammunition fires following penetration. The division's combat effectiveness declined not from lack of replacement tanks, but from loss of experienced crews who could not escape burning vehicles. By Christmas Day, Panzer Division could field only 28 operational Panthers, manned largely by replacement crews with minimal training. The contrast with American tank losses during the same period revealed the cumulative advantage wet storage provided. The 2nd Armored Division lost 63 Shermans during defensive operations near Chelles between December 23rd and December 26th. Field examination of knocked-out tanks found that only 18 of the 63 had burned, less than 30%. The remaining 45 tanks suffered mechanical damage or crew casualties but remained structurally intact. American tank recovery teams working behind the lines salvaged 31 of the knocked-out Shermans for repair. These tanks returned to combat within 2 weeks, their experienced crews surviving to fight in replacement vehicles. The German forces lacked equivalent recovery capability because burned-out Panthers provided nothing worth salvaging. The differential in recoverability compounded numerical advantages that American production had already established. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. January 1945. Alsace region, France. The 6th SS Panzer Army withdrew from the Ardennes Bulge and redeployed southward for Operation Nordwind, Hitler's subsidiary offensive aimed at recapturing Strasbourg. The panzer divisions involved included the 10th SS Panzer Division Frundsberg, equipped with a mixed force of Panthers and captured American tanks. The 13th Company of the 10th SS Panzer Regiment operated 12 M4A3 Shermans, captured intact at Haguenau during the offensive's opening days. These tanks had belonged to the American 43rd Tank Battalion and were abandoned when their crews received orders to withdraw faster than the tanks could traverse difficult terrain. German recovery teams found all 12 tanks mechanically operational, requiring only refueling and minor maintenance before entering service under Wehrmacht control. The German tankers assigned to the captured Shermans received brief familiarization training, then deployed them as reconnaissance vehicles and mobile reserves. The simplicity of Sherman controls and the reliability of American automotive engineering allowed German crews to become proficient within days, something that would have been impossible with more complex German designs. SS Hauptscharführer Otto Bauer commanded one of the captured Shermans during operations near Bitche in mid-January. His previous assignment had been a Panther OSG in the division's main regiment, a tank he had abandoned after an American tank destroyer penetrated the right sponson and triggered an ammunition fire that killed his loader before the rest of the crew could escape through the smoke-filled interior. The Sherman he now commanded had taken a hit during its capture that penetrated the lower hull and damaged several wet ammunition storage cells. The crew compartment had filled with steam, forcing the American crew to evacuate, but the ammunition had not ignited. German mechanics, examining the damage, found the water-jacketed ammunition containers exactly as Oberfeldwebel Steiner had described in his technical report from Falaise the previous summer. Bauer's company operated the captured Shermans for 6 weeks before fuel shortages and mechanical attrition reduced their number. During that period, 3 of the 12 Shermans took penetrating hits from American guns. All 3 crews survived because the wet ammunition storage prevented catastrophic fires. None of the 3 tanks burned beyond recovery, and 2 were subsequently repaired and returned to German service. The experience convinced Bauer and his fellow German tankers that American engineers had solved a problem Wehrmacht designers had ignored. The wet storage system added complexity and reduced ammunition capacity, but it kept crews alive. That single advantage outweighed any theoretical performance superiority German tanks possessed on specification sheets. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. February 1945. Kummersdorf Proving Ground, Brandenburg, Germany. Wehrmacht technical evaluation teams examined captured American tanks that had been shipped to Germany for comprehensive testing. Multiple M4A3 wet storage variants underwent destructive testing to document exactly how the ammunition protection system functioned and whether German industry could implement similar designs. Engineers fired captured Panther guns at Sherman hulls loaded with ammunition, varying the angle and location of hits to determine wet storage effectiveness under controlled conditions. The results confirmed field reports from combat zones. Wet storage reduced fire probability to approximately 15% compared to 60 to 70% for dry storage designs. The testing program produced detailed technical reports that circulated through Wehrmacht armor development offices and reached senior leadership, including General Heinz Guderian, Inspector General of Panzer Troops. The reports acknowledged American engineering superiority in crew survivability systems and recommended immediate implementation of similar protection in German tank production. But implementation proved impossible given German industrial circumstances in early 1945. Allied strategic bombing had destroyed key manufacturing facilities. Raw material shortages limited production of any tank design. The labor force increasingly consisted of slave workers whose sabotage further degraded quality. Modifying Panther production to incorporate wet ammunition storage would require retooling that would halt production for months, time Germany did not possess. The Panther would continue production with vulnerable ammunition storage until Soviet forces overran the manufacturing facilities in April 1945. German tank designers had identified the problem, understood the solution, examined working examples, and lacked the industrial capacity to implement fixes. The institutional failure represented everything wrong with German late war. Military-industrial decision-making. March 1945. Rhine River crossings. American armored divisions conducting offensive operations into Western Germany benefited from lessons learned throughout 2 years of combat. Wet storage Shermans equipped the majority of tank battalions. Their improved crew survivability documented in unit after-action reports that proved the modification's value. The 3rd Armoured Division crossed the Rhine at Remagen with 217 Shermans, predominantly M4A3 75mm wet storage variants, with some M4A3 76mm tanks mixed in for additional firepower. During the subsequent drive into central Germany between March 7th and April 11th, the division lost 142 Shermans to enemy action. Field examination of knocked-out tanks found that 38 of the 142 had burned, approximately 27%. This represented a substantial improvement over early war burn rates and proved that wet storage maintained its protective effectiveness even after months of combat operations and mechanical wear on ammunition storage cells. Crew casualties in the 3rd Armoured Division during this period averaged 0.95 killed or wounded per tank lost, significantly lower than the 1.28 average from earlier campaigns using dry storage tanks. The reduction in casualties resulted directly from fewer catastrophic ammunition fires that trapped crews inside burning vehicles. German panzer divisions opposing the Rhine crossings suffered dramatically higher casualty rates per tank lost because ammunition fires remained common. Wehrmacht records from this period are fragmentary, but surviving documents from Panzer Lehr Division indicate ammunition fires caused approximately 70% of total Panther losses during March and early April fighting. The cumulative effect of 2 years of differential survivability had created an unbridgeable experience gap between American and German tank crews. American tankers who survived multiple knockouts because wet storage prevented fires accumulated combat experience that made them increasingly effective. German tankers died in ammunition fires before gaining equivalent experience, forcing German units to commit replacement crews with minimal training. April 1945. Ruhr Pocket. American forces encircled German Army Group B, trapping more than 300,000 troops, including substantial armoured forces. The fighting during the pocket's reduction provided final evidence of wet storage effectiveness under intensive combat conditions. The 7th Armoured Division participated in clearing operations that destroyed or captured dozens of German Panthers. American intelligence teams examining abandoned Panthers found consistent evidence of ammunition storage vulnerability. Multiple Panthers showed burn damage confined to sponson areas where ammunition had detonated, leaving the rest of the hull relatively intact but completely inoperable. One Panther Ausf-G examined near Winterberg demonstrated the catastrophic nature of sponson ammunition fires. The tank had taken a single penetrating hit from an American 76mm gun that struck the right sponson directly over the ammunition storage area. The resulting fire had been so intense that it melted the turret ring, welded the turret in place, and caused ammunition to cook off for more than 30 minutes. The crew had not escaped. All 5 bodies were found inside the tank, killed by the initial penetration or overcome by smoke before they could reach the hatches. The loader and gunner on the right side of the turret had been killed instantly by fragments from the penetrating round and detonating ammunition. The commander, driver, and radio operator had died from smoke inhalation while attempting to escape through hatches jammed by thermal expansion of the metal. American investigators documenting the scene noted the contrast with a knocked-out M4A3 Sherman located 50 meters away. That Sherman had taken 3 penetrating hits, one of which had struck the hull floor wet ammunition storage directly. The ammunition cells had been damaged, and water had vented through the penetration holes, but the propellant had not ignited. The crew had escaped through the large hatches without casualties, and the tank remained structurally sound enough that American recovery teams had already tagged it for salvage. The 2 tanks, sitting within sight of each other on a German hillside, represented the fundamental difference between American and German approaches to tank crew survivability. The Panther emphasized firepower and armor protection, sacrificing crew survivability for combat effectiveness. The Sherman balanced firepower with survivability, accepting some performance limitations to keep crews alive. In sustained combat operations measured across months and years rather than individual engagements, the Sherman approach proved superior. Keeping experienced crews alive mattered more than any specification advantage, because experience could not be manufactured or transported from factories. Each time a Panther burned with its crew trapped inside, Germany lost training and experience that required months to replace. Each time a Sherman crew escaped a knocked-out tank, America retained that experience for future combat. May 1945. War's end in Europe. The final accounting of American and German tank losses revealed the cumulative impact of ammunition storage design on crew casualties and vehicle recovery rates. Statistical analysis conducted by U.S. Army operations research teams documented approximately 50,000 Sherman tanks produced during the war, with roughly 10,000 lost to enemy action in all theaters. Of those 10,000 lost Shermans, approximately 4,000 burned. The remaining 6,000 suffered mechanical or combat damage without fires, and approximately 3,500 of those non-burned tanks were recovered and repaired for continued service. The wet storage modification introduced in early 1944 had reduced burn rates from 60 to 80% down to 10 to 15%, saving thousands of American lives and thousands of recoverable tanks. German production totaled approximately 6,000 Panthers between January 1943 and April 1945. Approximately 4,000 Panthers were lost to enemy action or mechanical failure during the war. Of those 4,000 losses, approximately 2,800 burned from ammunition fires, representing 70% of total losses. The high burn rate reflected unchanging ammunition storage vulnerability that German engineers never corrected. The differential in crew casualties resulting from fire rates proved devastating for German combat effectiveness. American tank crews suffered approximately 10,000 killed in action across all theaters during the war. German panzer crews suffered proportionally higher casualties despite fielding fewer tanks, with ammunition fires accounting for the majority of deaths that could have been prevented through better engineering. The post-war analysis influenced every subsequent American tank design. The principle that crew survivability equaled operational effectiveness became foundational to U.S. armor development. Protected ammunition storage with blowout panels, suppression systems, and isolated compartments characterized every American tank from the M46 Patton through the M1 Abrams. The German military, reformed as the Bundeswehr in West Germany during the 1950s, explicitly rejected Panther-style design philosophy when developing the Leopard 1 main battle tank. That vehicle incorporated wet ammunition storage, blowout panels, and every lesson learned from analyzing why Panthers burned. Shermans survived. The story of wet ammunition storage represents one of World War II's great engineering achievements, less dramatic than radar or the atomic bomb, but equally significant in determining the war's outcome. American automotive engineers, applying practical problem-solving to a specific vulnerability, created a system that saved thousands of lives and maintained combat effectiveness through crew survivability. German tank designers pursued theoretical performance excellence, creating tanks that impressed with specifications, but killed their crews through preventable fires. The contradiction between impressive armor and vulnerable ammunition storage epitomized everything wrong with German engineering culture that prioritized individual vehicle superiority over systemic sustainability. The mathematics proved simple and brutal. A tank that keeps its crew alive beats a tank that burns them, regardless of armor thickness or gun penetration. Wet storage Shermans maintained operational availability through crew survival and vehicle recovery. Dry storage Panthers suffered irreversible losses through catastrophic fires that eliminated both tanks and crews. The lesson extended beyond World War II to inform fundamental principles of military engineering. The best weapon system is not the one with the most impressive specifications, but the one that keeps its operators alive to use it effectively over sustained operations. Crew survivability is operational capability, because experienced crews are the most valuable and least replaceable component of any weapons system. Oberfeldwebel Kurt Steiner survived the war and provided detailed testimony to American investigators about the captured Sherman he examined at Falaise in August 1944. His observations about wet ammunition storage influenced post-war U.S. Army studies on tank survivability. In interviews conducted during the 1950s, Steiner acknowledged that American engineers had solved a problem German designers never took seriously until too late. The American approach to tank development emphasized practical utility over theoretical perfection. Automotive engineers borrowed cooling system design principles from civilian vehicles and applied them to ammunition storage with remarkable success. The resulting system lacked elegance, added weight and complexity, and worked better than anything German theoretical engineering produced. The wet storage modification represented everything American industrial engineering did well during World War II. Identify a specific problem. Develop a practical solution using existing technology. Test thoroughly. Implement rapidly. Improve continuously based on field feedback. The systematic approach produced weapons that functioned reliably under combat conditions, keeping soldiers alive to continue fighting. German engineering culture pursued sophisticated solutions to theoretical problems, creating weapons that impressed in testing, but failed in sustained combat. The Panther looked magnificent, boasted exceptional specifications, and killed its crews through ammunition fires that better engineering could have prevented. The contradiction between capability and survivability defined German tank development throughout the war. The Panther's failure teaches more than its specifications reveal, precisely because failure exposes truths that success obscures. Success can be attributed to many factors and interpreted multiple ways. Failure, particularly catastrophic failure of sophisticated systems, reveals fundamental problems that cannot be rationalized or attributed to circumstance. The Panther failed to protect its crews because German strategic assumptions, technical culture, and procurement processes produced weapons unsuited to sustained combat operations. That failure, documented in meticulous detail by both German and American technical investigations, provides lessons of enduring value about the relationship between engineering sophistication and military effectiveness. The Sherman wet storage system succeeded because American engineers understood that keeping crews alive mattered more than any performance specification. That success, purchased through practical engineering and ruthless focus on crew survivability, determined which tank designs influenced post-war development and which became cautionary examples of theoretical excellence divorced from practical utility. The captured Sherman that Oberfeldwebel Steiner examined in August 1944, with its water-jacketed ammunition cells and revolutionary protection system, represented industrial maturity and sound engineering principles based on practical experience. It was tangible proof that automotive engineers solving specific problems produced better military equipment than theoretical designers pursuing abstract performance maximums. The wet ammunition storage modification exemplified American military industrial success during World War II. It saved thousands of lives. It maintained combat effectiveness through crew survival. It influenced every subsequent tank design, and it demonstrated that engineering focused on keeping soldiers alive produces more decisive military advantage than engineering focused on impressive specifications. The lesson remains relevant to contemporary defense engineering, where technological sophistication must be balanced against reliability, maintainability, and crew survivability. Modern tank designers studying wet storage systems learn that protecting the people who operate weapons matters more than optimizing the weapons themselves, because skilled operators are always more valuable than sophisticated machinery. The Panther burned because German engineers never prioritized crew survivability over combat performance. The Sherman survived because American engineers understood that crews who lived to fight again determined long-term combat effectiveness more than any single engagement advantage. That fundamental difference in design philosophy shaped the war's outcome as certainly as any battle. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.